what's up, everybody? How's it going? Thank you for tuning in to the podcast, Grind, the stories of people that made it through struggles and came out the other side, people that have grinded it out and somehow figured life out and how to be successful in fulfilling their purpose. Yet last week I had Sal with me, and that's my pops if you guys don't know it. He was sharing his testimony in the struggle of growing up in Watsonville, California, in the streets where he grew up, and how he came out of it, how he survived it, and we were getting into the story. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody out there who's supported this podcast, who's listened, and who's liked and shared and subscribed. We appreciate it. We're just starting out, so the more we get our word out, the more successful we can be. For my friends that have out there and reached out, and the people that have reached out, I just want to thank you. We're preparing a studio, but for the time being, we wanted to just go ahead and make a step of faith and just step out and start recording and getting some content out there. So we thank you. But that being said, let's go ahead, and I got Sal here this morning here in Washington State, not California. And I'm excited to have him here. What we're going to be sharing is the last part of his story, which we spoke about several things. If you tuned in last week, you know. But for those of you who didn't, where we left off was he talked about how he had got married, but he left the hood, but he brought the hood in his marriage. He couldn't get rid of some of the habits that he had. And also he shared a little bit about his little brother who was following in his footsteps towards the gang life and towards the living in the neighborhoods out there. And we also shared a little bit about a moment where he almost got hooked on a drug called heroin, but he was going to tell the story about that. But I'm going to go ahead and let him go ahead and start. So let's go ahead and leave off. So you said that you were married and that your marriage was starting to fall apart because of the addictions that you had brought in. And can you go ahead and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. To continue on what we were talking about and stuff, and again, I want to say this is a privilege to be able to do this. You know, it's privilege and it's not easy either. You know, when we call it out there, everybody calls it airing out your dirty laundry is never fun, right? So, anyways, but to go back and talk about what we have been talking about was in my testimony, and the situation was we were talking about the heroin situation, and that was a long time ago, and I was young at that time still. You know, I'm not going to get into dates and times. As you get older, you know, they all tend to get together, and before you know it, you don't know which it is, you know. And but anyways, so at that moment when I was going through that, and I was with my friends, and they were getting ready to do that, and I was getting ready to do that, and I kind of felt at that time that was a part of the process. Everybody was hanging out, everybody was doing it, all the older guys were doing it. I remember it wasn't weird to pull into a gas station, and you know, you walk into the restroom and there's 2-3 guys there that you know that are older cats that you look up to that are shooting up heroin, you know, and that's the way it was. But at that moment in my life when that was going on, it was like, you know, I didn't understand it at the time, but I understand it now, and I'll explain later what I meant by saying that. But at that moment, someone stepped in. There was one guy that sat there and said, "Oh no, you're not going to do that, Sal." And,
you said you were tied off.
Yeah, we were ready to do it. I was sitting there and I was ready, and I was one of those persons that didn't like needles, and I was like, oh, you know. But someone stepped in and said, hey, and it was a friend of my dad's. You know, one of the guys that hung out, and he did it too. You know, but he stopped me. He stopped me in the process, and he told the other guy that's not going to happen. He told him if he ever sees that he's going to come after him, and he sent me home. And you know, at the time I was pretty mad.
So somebody intervened and stopped you. A big homie said, "Hey, that ain't cool, man."
Basically,
yeah.
And that's what happened. And from there on, you know, nobody really invited me to that type of situation, and I never really, you know, pursued it on my own. I was very young at the time. But I thank God for that. But, you know, later I'll explain about that. But then back to where we were as far as my brother in the situation. he
Oh, you said he was in prison.
Yeah.
And he was doing federal time.
That's where we were at. Okay, yeah. So he was in prison. He did some time. He got out, and then he ran amok for a while. But I had moved out of town. I had Mikey at the time. He was a baby, and I got over there. But I still brought those people to my house. They would come and visit on the weekend. I'd go back. I would do things and then come back to the house. You know, I was still half in and half out.
Yeah. Let me stop you there for a minute. That's another thing, man. You know, so right now what I've been doing is we've been talking about moving forward and breaking barriers. One of the things that I talked about is when you leave your old friends or your old environment, a lot of the times we think, like, you'll hear this all the time, like even in our culture, like what happens is a young person gets in trouble and they send him to Mexico. They say, you know what, let me send him to Mexico. He's going to be all right over there. And they send him out there to try to learn how to work and to be a good person in society. Or they'll move you out of town. And, you know, sometimes those things do help, but the real opportunities have to be taken by oneself. Like, you can leave, but that doesn't mean things are going to change. You know, I figured that out. My dad's going to share it right now. But, you know, I left all the time. I would leave my neighborhood, but I always went back because there's things that are inside of us that if we don't overcome, sometimes we get stuck in. So this is just a side note that if you are a person right now, you might have to look at the people around you, man. Who are you surrounding yourself with, and where are you going back to? You know what I mean? But anyway, so you're talking about that you would bring your friends over.
So it became a vicious cycle, you know, over and over doing it. And also trying at the time, you know, I was a young father, you know, and I was trying to, you know, be that father, which that wasn't happening. When you're a young kid, you realize that, you know, being a father is not as easy as we tend it to be, even though a lot of people have done it and they've been through it and they've gone through it. But, you know, so at the time when all that was going on, I would still, it wasn't as frequent as before, you know, when I was young and I didn't have nobody. But now I was still doing it, but not as much. And I was getting in trouble, you know, drunk drivings. I got a drunk driving. It just like, it was a snowball of things, of effects going on.
And were you working at this time?
Yeah, and at this time when I turned 19, I had started working, and I started working in the trade, and I had been working all that time, and all that becomes are you able to be a functioning addict or a functioning alcoholic? Because that's what it comes down to. Because there's the ones that, you know, you can party all night long and everything, and the next day you're late and you don't go to work and you get fired. Well, I wasn't that one. I was the one that I could party all night long for 3 days and just show up to work and come back and party, go back and forth.
I remember, you know? I mean, there's always one of them guys, man. I remember at work, you would see the one guy that he'd party all night and go into work the next day. I remember, I just even remember a little side story, man. I remember a guy came in, man, and he was all spun out, man, and he was in the corner, and I remember one of the bosses and the contractor say, hey, man, that guy's gonna hurt himself. You better get him off the job site, man. Yeah. It's a vicious cycle. So you were in the trade. Yeah. What trade were you in?
Sheet metal heating and air conditioning. I was a journeyman in construction.
You were
HVAC.
Union?
Yeah, I was union for a few years, for some years. And I started the trade when I was 18, 19. And, you know, I really stuck with that trade the whole time, you know. I mean, I didn't get the experience of doing different jobs or different places. I just stayed in the same trade. So that's another effect, that when everything fell apart, you know, there was no other job I could do but that job. But, you know, when you're in that situation and, you know, you lose all that, you know, that's, it's hard to continue doing that type of work, you know, when once you let that go, but that's another story also. But going back onto what was going on is, like I said, my brother is a product of Watsonville, and you know, we're from Watsonville, and Watsonville is no joke when it comes down to the lifestyle there. You know, you can be hurt real quick. You know, people died. There was a lot of people that died during my time. You know, a lot of people, friends of mine, close friends, and then my brother too. A lot of his friends. How we survived, I don't know. You know, because the honest truth is, there was a lot of situations where I shouldn't be here right now, and other than getting into detail, I'm not going to get into detail on it, but there were situations where I came out of that I, sat and said, my God, how come me, not everybody else, how come me and everybody else had those problems, that happened. I had a good friend of mine that overdosed at a young age because, he would do drugs with us and he was snorting cocaine and doing that with us. And then he stopped hanging out with us. And then he stayed in his garage and he lived with his mom and he overdosed one night and died, And it was like, but at the time it was just like, oh, my friend died and that's it. But we continued doing what we were doing, and it was a vicious cycle. And that's why I brought that in to my family life and everything. But as time went on, we sat there and then my family started falling apart. Things started happening. Mikey grew up and things started going on, and like I said, I got in drunk drivings. I had gotten to jail, went to jail for different things. Then my brother started coming down and hanging out more often, and then, even one time I got pulled over with Felix in the car and the police in Watsonville. And I because I had went to Watsonville and I had already moved out and everything. And I was living over at that side of town. And that police officer that pulled us over sits there and he looks at me and he goes, and he was looking at Felix. He hadn't recognized Felix because Felix had been gone for a while, And my brother gave him another name. And the cop was new. He didn't really know him, but the other police officer was an officer that had been there for a while, takes me to the back and he looks at me and he goes, "You're Sal, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "You haven't been around in a while." And I says, "Yeah." I moved out of town. He goes, "Well," "I'm going to give you guys a break right now. And I'm telling you right now that, let's keep it that way. Stay out of town. Don't come into town." So he was basically telling me, don't come into town because he knew who I was, and he goes, "And I know the other guy that's in the car. I know who he is too. He gave a different name, but I'm going to let you guys go with the whole thing is that you're doing better. You haven't been around here." So basically he was giving me,
an opportunity.
Yeah, an opportunity, and I said, "Wow, man." And I left. When I left, I went back. But anyways, that was what was going on.
So yeah, now we're in your later 20s.
Yeah, later 20s. Okay, so we're sitting there. But like I say, we were doing that, and then we continued, and then life continues on. And
what happened with your marriage?
So the marriage fell apart. She started doing her own thing. So I started doing my own thing, and then she left. She left.
So your marriage didn't make it.
Yeah, didn't make it, and we had everything.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there just because I want the listeners out there. So you had the drug addiction problem. You had a lot of issues going on, man. And there's a moment now where your wife leaves you.
Yes.
How are you feeling at that time, man? Like,
lost. It was hard because when you have your family as us as Latinos, as men, we're prideful, and for the woman to go and leave us is a big thing, So I even tried to quit doing drugs and alcohol on my own. I couldn't do it. I even did it at one point for 13 years. I had stopped doing it, and still
for your marriage.
Yeah, and still the marriage wasn't working because it was back and forth, and there was a lot of stuff going on.
So there's a highlight right there in this story. So he says that he stopped for 13 years for his marriage. A lot of times, and this is the topic of this testimony, so that's why we're talking about this. But in addiction, many people stop for other people.
Right.
You could stop because your kids. You could stop because your family, your marriage, and that's good if it works for you. Whatever works. I'm not a person against anything, but a lot of times there are issues that go beyond your people that you're getting right for. Because you got to be a better version of yourself. So number one, if you don't love yourself, if you don't look in yourself and say, man, I got issues, I got problems that are not just, I got to quit for this person, but I got to quit for myself. And that's not being selfish. Because what's selfish is doing it for other people because it's not a long-term lasting effect. You're getting right, but it's only temporary. And, Sal sharing this, my pops, I should say, how to respect my father. He's saying, man, I stopped for my marriage and I stopped for my kids. But then 13 years later, this monster came back and haunted him, and so and your marriage.
So
was
when the
gone?
marriage broke up after that, and that's when the marriage broke up. That same day, that the marriage was broke, she left, and then that's at that same point, I went and got drunk and I partied and stuff, and I even got pulled over that day, and somehow, that's the way the devil works. But that I had gotten released. The police officer didn't give me a ticket or nothing, and but the same night I started.
You went back.
I went back. They gave me they pulled me over.
So
Throughout this, and then during this time, this was going on. Another thing happened to me. I ended up dating and doing some other stuff, and then I ended up having another son.
Yeah.
And I love my son that was born at the time and everything. Yeah. But it was because I started dating. I started doing all kinds of things. I was partying. I was doing all this stuff now, and it was continuing on. And so it is a vicious cycle, the way it works and stuff. And I mean, it was just piling on stuff after stuff after stuff after stuff, garbage inside me, stuff going on. And then, and it got to a point where I just had to say, you know what, enough is enough,
But that being said,
mm-hmm.
I'm hearing what you're talking about, man, and that's deep. You've been through a lot. You've been through a lot in life, from when your parents came down here from Mex and from Texas, and were trying to build a life, being teenagers. You were raised in that house. And some people are hearing right now, and they're hearing all this crazy chaos. But let me remind you, the reason I have him up here too is because of the story of victory. But also, I want you to see something, because at this time, he had a business that was successful. $1 million business. They were making money. I mean, he was in the union. But I want to share that this can happen to ordinary people. It isn't people that just grow up in ghettos as well. Because he came out of poverty. Because I remember as a kid, and you had a business, correct?
Right.
In Monterey, you had a business, right? And how was that going?
During that time that I was trying to get good and doing the right things and stuff, and thinking that my marriage was gonna work and everything, and that I ended up opening a business. I was in the union for a lot of years, and I got an opportunity to open up a company, and then that company, anyways, that ended up. That company, it was going for a little while, for about 3 or 4 years, and then ended up shutting down the company because of the way the economy was going, and I had gotten divorced.
Yeah.
And so that
this was during that market crash.
Yeah, and then I got divorced, and then that so I lost that. I lost the business. I had my contractor's license was gone and everything. So anyways, that all happened and stuff, and then it was very difficult. It's very difficult. The thing is that this is a lifelong process that one goes through, and I realized that from the day that I was born to the day that my family fell apart, and I was losing my family.
But you picked up a new hobby during this time, because I remember, and I'm just gonna remind you.
Oh yeah.
You started riding bikes, right? Harleys, and started hanging around.
So I started riding motorcycle and stuff, and
without getting into too many details, but right.
And I started riding around, and a bunch of stuff was going on. I was doing a bunch of stuff. I became that person that I used to be when I was young.
So that person came back.
As an adult, and I was basically in the same situation. And I rode my Harley around, and I was selling drugs, and I was doing everything, and I got in a lot of trouble. Basically what happened is, throughout all this time that all this stuff was going on, I really didn't get. I mean, I was in trouble, but I wasn't in trouble, until I finally one time got busted. And then, when I finally got busted, then I started having court issues and everything. But
was your brother around during this time?
Yeah, and then my brother was around too.
So he ended up following you, right?
Yeah, he ended up following me around and doing everything, and doing the same stuff with the motorcycle and everything. And we hung out, we hung around with some people and stuff, and got him really involved. And and the drugs and the alcohol, they put a smoke screen in your face. You know, you think you may be the person. You know, I'm the baddest person here, and I'm doing this and this and that, and all of it's a lie. You know, it's not true. You know, it's like that's not what's really going on. Mm-hmm. You find out later, man. Because in the end, I ended up with nothing. I ended up with no bike, no nothing.
So you lost the business.
Lost a lot of stuff. Lost the business.
Lost the motorcycles.
Lost, you know, I had a bunch of other stuff that, you know, I had a boat and I had, my
and it was
my houses. I had houses. I lost the houses.
And it was a nice bike, by the way. I remember this bike, man. He had a deluxe, a Harley Deluxe. 6 speed, right? What year was it?
It's 2007.
Yeah, he had
brand
the
new when I bought it.
airbags, the pinstripe, man, and it was
put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, it was about $25,000 bike. It was a nice bike.
Yeah.
So, but the reason I'm bringing this all up is because the material stuff. I remember he had all that stuff, man, but in the end, it was gone, and it didn't really matter.
Right.
And so you're at a point now. You said you're riding around, hanging out.
Yeah.
But nothing really.
I didn't care about my life. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about anybody else either. Anybody that I had in my life, I, just used them for whatever. I really didn't care about anybody or anything. My sister at this point was a Christian, and my son was a Christian, and I didn't want nothing to do with any of that. I was, like Saulo was when he got hit on the mountain.
I'm going to share a little bit too right now, just because now this is my part where I came in a little bit. This is a unique interview because I'm able to kind of, not only did I witness most of this stuff, but I remember, growing up and seeing my dad, just violence was normal. I just knew that, if anybody disrespected, we were taught you fight, and we grew up a little bit different. But I remember at the time, I'll get into my testimony on a whole nother episode, but I remember I had my encounter with God, and I ended up finding God, but I remember I went to visit my dad because they told me, hey man, your pops ain't doing too good. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah man, you should go visit him, because I was living in Mexico. I was living in Tijuana at the time with some family out there, and I was hanging out, and I remember I went to visit, and it was his birthday, so I was excited. I said, let me go pick up my pops, and this is during the time where, he's riding around on his motorcycle, and and I end up seeing him, and he's like, hey man, what's up, man? I said, hey, I'm gonna pick you up real quick, we're gonna go eat. He goes, no problem. Actually, you know what, I'm like, it was my birthday, and I was like, come spend birthday with me, man, come with me, pops, it's all good, man. So he says, come pick me up. And he goes, and I'll take you to eat. And I said, all right, let's go, man. So I pick him up, I remember, and I just seen it in his face. When your loved ones ain't doing right, man. And he picks me up, and I go, all right. And he goes, well, I ain't got money right now. Hang on, we got to go do something real quick. And I remember he says, take me over to this house real quick, right? So I take him down the street, right? Here I am trying to do good, I'm like, all right, pops. And I remember I drop him off. All of a sudden, he goes to a door. He's knocking on the door. Nobody answers. He kicks the door down. Boom! He runs in there. And I don't know. It was a horrible scene, man. Some people are getting hit, beat up. And he comes back out, gets in the car. He goes, come on, let's go. And I'm like, whoa, welcome back, right? And he tells me, I got money now. We can go grab you a present and let's go eat. I'm 20-something years old, man. I'm like, Pops, you ain't got to do that, man. You're going to get me in jail out here. Just the chaos that he was surrounded in, and the chaos that not even one day being back from Mexico, and I'm right there kicking it with my dad, and I'm seeing this, and I'd seen that as a kid growing up, but to see him later in his life doing that, man, it was a scary moment. And I remember I just said, man, God, my dad needs you, man, because right now, if he continues like this, he ain't gonna make it. And I remember I tried to minister to him at this time. I said, hey, because I was out there doing my thing, man, for a good minute. And I got myself together, man. And some of my friends out there I know are listening to this. You know who I was. You know what I did. I don't even got to testify on that, man. But I wanted my dad to get to have an encounter with God. And I was praying and praying. I'd minister to him, and he'd be like, man, I don't want to hear that. Yeah, I remember he even said, man, I'm the devil himself. You ministering to the wrong dude. and he wanted nothing to do with God. So I had just left it in God's hands, man. I didn't go back again because I didn't want to be around that, man. So I knew I had to let him go for a minute. Sometimes you gotta let people go and let God deal with them, right? You know what I mean? Even myself, that's what needed to happen with me. But that being said,
Yeah,
so you're at that moment in your life, man.
Yeah, so there was a lot of stuff going on. I wanted nothing to do with God. I hated my sister. I hated my family. I hated myself, basically. That's what ended up happening. A lot of the times that when we do the things that we do, we think we do it because we're tough and because we got, nobody can mess with us. We're the baddest fighters. We're the baddest everything, baddest. Yeah, we can do anything, and the truth is we're broken inside, and that's what it comes down to. As a kid growing up, everything that went on with me and my family and everything, a lot of times I was so mad at my dad, and because he would there was a lot going on in the family life as a kid growing up, with my mom, with me, with all of us, and I was so angry at him for everything that that I always said, I'm not gonna be like him. I'm not gonna do those things. I'm not gonna do that, man. And he had a child out of wedlock, which I have a beautiful sister that she lives in Sacramento right now, and she's doing really well.
And she came into your life later, right?
Yeah, she came. I ended up meeting her because of her. She had a family member on that side that had knew who my dad was, knew who she was. I walked into a store. She asked me if I was my dad's son, and she said, yeah. And then she goes, oh, I know her sister. And I was like, I know your sister. And I was like, my sister, And she's like, yeah. And I knew about her, but I said, I go, you know what? And I go, I want to talk to her. I want to contact her. So I ended up contacting her, and she ended up coming down. And we ended up meeting and hanging out and everything. Apparently this was something that had already been done through my sister, but I didn't really know the details of it, and I knew there was someone, but I finally got to meet her, and I ended up meeting her kids and her and stuff, and that was awesome, and that's another thing at the end I will explain about that and stuff, but that ended up happening, and like I told you, I had a child also during that time, and so I basically had become my dad. I had a child also that, and he's, and my son is awesome. He's great. I wish I could spend more time with them. I wish I could spend time with everybody more. But sometimes God has different reasons for what He does, and He's always right. But anyways, so that what ended up happening was that was going on, and we ended up there, and then my brother. He's caught up and everything, and he starts.
So you're at rock bottom. This is where you're at rock bottom.
I'm at rock bottom. I ended up.
So what happened?
So when I get there to that point where I'm at rock bottom, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking again, my mind is saying that I'm that main drug dealer. I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and the truth was that I was just slowly falling into the pit of hell, and then Mike came up and gave me an opportunity, and I went to a church program, and I started talking about They started talking to me about God and what He's going to do in my life and what He's doing. God knew us from the beginning when we were in our mother's womb. He knows every hair on our head. And He knows everything that the purpose in our lives.
And so I remember I got a phone call while I was in Mexico, and it was from my pastor at the time, which Pastor George. God bless him. He knows who he is. Pastor George Gonzalez from Victory Outreach. They actually reached out, and my pastor called me, and he says, "Hey, Mike," he says, "your dad, he came to the home, to the men's home, and he got himself together. He's getting his life together. He's came in ready to submit." So
I had went the first time I went into the program, and I got myself kicked out, and I ran out of there right away, and I got out of there when I didn't give God an opportunity at all, and I had and like I said, I had some charges on me. There was a lot of stuff going on, And when that happened, I left, and then a bunch of stuff was going on at the time and where I was at, and some more people died, a bunch of stuff going on, and I ended up partying one night, and I was sitting in a room, and I was watching everybody that was there, and I was watching myself, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? You know, I'm in a bad spot. And one of my ex sister-in-laws, my ex-wife, I called her and I told her, you know, that I was ready to go, and she ended up giving me a ride, and she took me to the home, and I ended up in the home, the home,
Yeah.
and I stayed there. I got myself together, and I made a decision. And God, actually, at the time, I didn't know that it was, you know, I thought it was me. Sal's making the decision. I'm doing this. But I realized after, as time went on, that what God started doing in my life, He started doing in my life.
Yeah.
That day that I was in that car, that situation, when that guy got me out of that not doing heroin, that was God. That was all these times, man, they were going, you know, it was going, and I realized all that what was going on, you know, and God had all those things prepared for me. Everything that we do in life, when we do it for us because of ourselves. Because God has our plan all planned out. He's got our life all planned out. But when we divert from that plan, that becomes our thing now. And that's when things start, you know, being different. You know, now we're taking control of what we're doing, and we're not letting God do anything. And that's where my life had become right there. So I was in there for 1 year, and when I was in there for a year, I realized I was in a relationship with. I was in the Victory Outreach.
Here in the men's home. Reverend was right. Who was the Rev at the time? The director, Rev, man.
Yeah,
Reverendo.
Yeah, and
Rev, God bless, man. But yeah, you got your life together.
They put up with me in there the first months because I was having a real hard time in there. It wasn't easy. I couldn't believe that someone could love me, you know, that didn't know me, you know, and that they had faith in me, and they would tell me that, you know, God's going to do something. And I was like, nah, you know what?
Mind blown.
Yeah. So that ended up happening. When that happened, anyways, to make a long story keep going, but I got out of the program. I ended up going to my sister's,
right?
And there I cemented more of what was going on.
It was a process then. It wasn't overnight.
No, it was a process. It was a process.
That's something that we also too, man. Like, you know, you gotta realize that everything's a process, man. Like success don't happen overnight. You see the story of turmoil, but then you see little by little he starts to get back into the direction that God intended for him, man.
Right.
And I saw this with my own eyes. And I thank God for people out there, like the people we mentioned right now, you know. I stay in contact with some of them, but the men that I'm talking about, like pastors and the reverends that were out there, man, that mentored and helped. And then he went over to my tia, Pastora Amy. He ended up going into a church right there, and they're still going strong over there. And they started working with you. You're living with your sister for a while, right?
Yeah, there was a point when I was still at the church, and my sister and them weren't talking to me because of what I had been doing, everything that was going on at the end there. Because, you know, I had started being around a rough crowd. I lost my.
But I'm talking about when you were living there with her. Right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Just before I got there, what ended up happening was my sister had come to visit me, and when she came to visit me, I mean, I was in the middle of a service, and she walked in, and I felt the hand behind me, and I felt a couple hands, and it was my mom, my sister, and my brother.
Oh, I got you. They were visiting you when you were in the program,
and they came to visit me, and in that service, I saw them, and I said, "That's a miracle. God gave me, you know, my mom and my sister and my brother." My brother was already in the program. He had already started trying to save his life, you know, and he wanted God to be a part of his life. And he was already ministering, you know, doing ministerial stuff for the church. And he told me, you know what, brother, it's time for you to come home, you know. And I was all like, wow, you know. And I went that's when I went to the church with Amy, and I was there with my brother, and my brother was there for a few months, and then something happened, and my brother told my brother-in-law and my sister, I'm leaving. I'm gonna leave. And he turns around, looks at me, and he says, Sal, I go, come on, let's go. And I was looking at him, and I was going, nah, man, yeah, I can't go. And he's all, what do you mean you can't go, man? Come on, let's just go. Forget this, you know. And I was all like, no. I go, you know what? I go, I can't, man. If I go out there, I'm gonna die, man. And I go, if you go out there, you're gonna die, man. And he's looking at me, and he's going, whatever, man. And he took off. You know, a few years later, he got caught up into the heroin again and started getting smoking.
So he went
meth and doing all that. You know, yeah, he went back to what we were doing before and everything. Not that I did heroin, but I was doing meth also at the time. You know, that's what the drug that I was selling at the time too, and you know all the stuff that I had going on. That was a big part of my life. But he got really heavy into it, and then within 2 years or 3 years, maybe, you know, he ended up dying. He died, and he died at 47, I think.
So your baby brother died.
My baby brother died, and the streets that we ran away from, that we tried to get away from, are the same streets that ate him up and gobbled him up. You know.
See, that's the thing, man. These streets don't got no feelings, man.
Yeah.
The streets got no feelings, man. You know, and you know it's funny because we always talk about, you know, you know, when you're younger, you know, you talk about how you like to brag where you came from, and you know that's a great, you know, I understand the being proud where you came from, but understand that, man, the streets, if you grew up in an area like we grew up in, man, they don't care about you. They don't care about you, man. And you know, my uncle ended up passing away, and he actually ended up, you know, he ended up living in a river at the end, man. It was an ugly story. You know, he came from being the big time gangster to the big time dope dealer to the man in a river on drugs, you know. But before he passed away, he gave his life to the Lord. Pastora Amy was right there. She was with her baby brother, my dad, and all their families were right there. Sabrina was there too. All of them were there to have a conclusion. They had a beautiful picture that they took at the beach when they laid him to rest, I should say, you know. But yeah, man. So he
couldn't break the cycle. He ended up in that same cycle that my sister, me had broken, you know, to get out of. You know, I understand something that I didn't understand before. You know, and like I said, God, without God in the center, we're not, it's hard to make it. You know, I mean, you know, there's no book on life. There's no, you know, there's nothing. I mean, if you grow up, my dad had me when he was 16. Like I said, you know, what's a 16-year-old how's he gonna raise his son and teach him all the right things if he didn't even know those things? You know, yeah. He didn't have those skills that, you know, we have now, opportunities all over the place to do that. And then the main opportunity that we have is we have the Bible to be able to open and to be able to read the scriptures and to understand how we should live, you know. In John 3:16, you know, God gave his son so we could be saved, you know, and I mean, what a precious gift that he gave. That's a father giving, you know, his most precious thing, you know, so we can live our lives, and then we choose to do what we're doing. Maybe, you know, maybe we were, you know, it worked at the time when we were 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. But if we survive and we get to the point where we're 20, you know, 30, 40, and we're still doing those things, what does that tell you? You know, and that's the thing that's the biggest thing of my testimony that I want to get out there. I started late, you know. I have now realized what I have to do in order to have a sane life and to do the things right. Not perfect by far. I'm not perfect, you know. I think Mike will be the first one to tell you that he's not perfect, you know, but we're doing the best that we can and trying to stay inside that, you know, area where we're trying to fulfill God's plan for our lives. At this point now in my life, I'm a minister in my church. I play music. My dad was a musician for years and years, but I didn't want nothing to do with the music because of our lives, the way they were. You know, my father was like, sometimes he would try to force me to play music, and I didn't want to, you know, because it was like, it wasn't the way, you know, we do music now, you know. It's like, it was different, you know. It's like,
but isn't it funny how God had that plan for music for you ever since you were a child? But
right,
it came to pass you as an adult, because now you're doing worship,
right,
and now you're singing, you're composing music, you
Yeah,
compose
right.
songs. He's a songwriter. If you guys don't know, he writes music. His
Right.
dad wrote music. And we're a musical family, man. We all love to sing.
Right.
We all love to play music, man. And that came to pass, man.
that's-
It came to pass. Your dad, I could imagine, you know, in my imagination would sit here today and would look at you and be proud.
yeah.
And
I
he
think
would
so.
love it. He would love to see that you're fulfilling that destiny.
I wish I would have loved. I wish and I would have loved for him to be a part of what we're doing. You know, he would have loved it. Our family. I realized something, that, you know, God loves his church, and he gave us all a lot of dones, gifts, gives us gifts so we could give. The gift is not for us to keep, it's to give it.
Yeah.
And how do you give it? By ministering, by doing those things that God set out for us to do, talking about God, telling the word of God, you know. And I understand that now, and
Complete different transformation from where you used to be.
Yes.
What would you? All right, let me stop you right there, man. Just because this is the interview, I want to ask you, what would you have told yourself at 16 years old, knowing what you know today?
Stop. Listen. Close your eyes and listen. Listen, because God will speak to you. You know, I mean, all this, what we can't see, what we can't feel, what we can't touch, sometimes we say it's not there, but you know what? It is there. I know that now because I've seen all the miracles I see miracles that happen. They happen around you all over the place if you pay attention. It comes in your little boy, your little girl, your wife, when she does something for you, you know, your kids when they do something for you, when your kids are doing something. I mean, that 16-year-old boy that I was never had that opportunity for someone to tell me that, you know. And if I could do it all over again, I mean, it's kind of a hard thing because who I was before is what made me who I am now.
Your experiences.
Yes. And the thing is that I was a survivor. I realized God had a major plan for my life, and it's like
you're a champion, man.
Yeah.
That's why if you guys notice, I said that he has a story of a champion, man, because champions, you guys got to understand, champions are not made through their wins, but actually a champion's made through their losses, man. You may say, what do you mean, man? It's about winning. Yes, it is, but your losses is what you learn from. You learn more from losses than you do your wins. Your wins show that you executed your plan. Your losses show you where you lacked and what you need to execute. The autopsy of why you lost or why there was this situation, man. And you've been through a lot. You're a fighter and you're here. That's why I wanted you to share this story for people that are out there, man. That let me go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and conclude this podcast. But what I want you to do is speak to the person out there, maybe right now that's going through something that they feel like they're struggling. Maybe they're not in the victory stage of you are. Maybe they're not even in the other stage. Maybe they're right at the rock bottom when you felt lost and lonely. What do you got to say to somebody like that, man, right now?
Well, there's hope out there. There's a life for you to have. You can be that father. You can be that good son. You can be that person that you want to be. Because not everybody wants to be doing what they're doing. You know, a lot of people, when you get caught up and you want to be, they're smoking dope or they're doing drugs or they're being a bad father or nobody wants to be those things. If you become those things, it's because life has thrown that at you, and that's who the devil told you that you are. And you know, but there's hope out there, and I'm letting you know, through Jesus Christ, your life can change. Let me tell you a small story real quick. I have a really, really, really good friend, and he just passed away. And he was a person that I met here in Washington. One of the first people that I met. He played music. He inspired me to play music. He impacted my life. And, you know, he was younger than me. And, you know, and he was a really good friend of mine. And we stayed in the church and we would play music together, practice. We went to Watsonville to minister. When I told him, hey, I want to go to Watsonville so we could minister music at the church there, and try to reach out to the youth and to the adults and stuff and tell them about Jesus Christ. And this guy, through this whole time, always worshiped God. He worshiped God. He always said it's God. Even when there were situations where I didn't like that, I would see something, he would always tell me, you know what, brother, I don't follow anybody but God. I don't, and I go, yeah, but they did this to you and they're doing this. No, he goes, they did those things, but you know what? Who am I to judge, or who am I to say anything? I just follow God. God is good. And through this whole time that I knew him, this is all he said. Well, just recently he passed away, and the words that I found out that he was, because of the COVID, nobody could visit, nobody could do anything. But I talked to him on the phone, and he was talking to me on the phone few days prior to him passing away, and he was telling me, you know what, and what do you think, Sal? And I told him, you know what, brother, it's gonna be okay. You've run a good life, because I told him, you inspired me. You did all these things. You taught all these kids to play music. You taught all these people, who you were. You had a testimony flawless. I says you would go to different countries to minister. You would go to different places to go take gifts to the kids. I says you were a good father. He had 4 kids, and he has his wife, and he has all these. He had all these things going on in his life, and yet he still passed away. But the whole time he kept saying, "I love Jesus." His last words were, "God is good. God is good." So that's an inspiring story when I hear that. God wants to do things in our lives, but we have to let him. And we have to worship him in the bad and the good and everything. This is a secret that I learned over time. It took me a long time, but the one thing that I was going to go back to is saying what I tell myself at 16 is just stay strong, continue your life, think about what you're doing, and let Jesus do something in your life. Because if you do let Jesus do something in your life, in your future is going to be blessings beyond the world. It's gonna the heavens are gonna open, and I know that this is something that is gonna happen. In my situation, it was a later in life to be doing what I'm doing, but I'm so happy that I found God and I have that relationship with God, and that's what it took. So that's the thing.
That's awesome, man. That's an awesome story, man. And I'm glad that you took time. Thank you for being a part of I would like to say, which is history, man, for this podcast. I had a podcast before, but this one is a different style one, and I really like it. We're going to stick with this. And we appreciate you being our first guest, and being able to share your story. I know it's not easy, but it's something that needs to be done. And I encourage people out there, man. We don't want to glorify our past. What I want to talk about this is it goes like this, man. You have to let go of your past in order to get to your future. Most people they tend to want to live in the past, whether it's hurts or even accomplishments. You could be bragging about, this is what I did, man. When I was in high school, I was the best football player. Man, we won state championships. I almost made it. And it seems like somebody who was a has-been. So you don't want to live in the past. But then also you get the other people that they're hurt and they talk about, man, I lost this, I lost that. You got to let it go to get to your future. Let go of the past. But what I believe that these stories is we're not supposed to forget our past, but you can't let go of it. Forgetting your past is something different. When you forget your past, you forget who you are and where you came from. We never want to do that, but we let it go. It happened. So he had to rekindle some of this stuff that maybe brought a lot of different things out. but now he's walking. He actually has his business now. If you guys didn't know, he has a contractor's license. He got married. He's got a family now.
Yeah,
He's got his. You want to go ahead and give a shout out and real quick and give you thanks as we get ready to close.
That's what I wanted to say real quick is that, you know, that what he just said was the truth. That's something that, because I live on the fact that I say, I don't want to tell you who I was. I want to tell you who I am now. That's what I want to do. I want to tell you about the victories of God and everything. But we have to sometimes dig into our past in order to remind ourselves where we came from. You know, and what he said is the truth. You know, I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful daughter. I have another son, you know, and I love them to death. And, you know, God put them in my life. And at the right time and for the right reasons, you know, now I realize that God did all that. And God, and all those moments in my life that I had talked about, when someone intersected and got in there and changed something or did something, and you know, those moments that someone showed up out of nowhere, you know, those are those moments that God was sitting there saying, you know what, you asked for me and I was there all those times. All you had to do is open your spiritual eyes and see. And the same thing with you guys that are out there. Open your spiritual eyes and you'll realize so many things that God has done in your life. And if you do it at a young age, hallelujah, man, because you're gonna have an awesome Christian life. But if you wait till you're later in life, the same thing. It's never too late.
There you go. All right, thank you everybody for listening. This was the part 2, man. The episode grinding, man. We're just gonna bring you some more raw stories, man. That was raw. I like that, man. I like that when it's raw, man. When you're just talking about what really took place in your life and who you are today. Everybody, I would appreciate it. Like I said, this is our first episodes, and I'd appreciate if you'd like and share. Get this word out there, man. This isn't for fame, but building a platform and a foundation for this podcast. I got a buddy who's going to help me out. I'll give a shout out to him later, but he's going to connect me with some people, and I'm excited for it because this podcast is going to grow and it's going to get even better. So if you were listening to this today, thank you. I appreciate it. And we're going to get more stories. We got people that come from the military backgrounds. I also got people that are coming in from a gang lifestyle, like, you know, like Sal. I got other people that are going to be coming in with stories where they just were kids that grew up in the church but took a wrong turn. I got suicide stories where people were going to commit suicide. There's all these different stories. So if you can't relate maybe to this episode, maybe in the future you'll relate to a different one. But what we're talking about is overcoming all the obstacles that come in your way. And we got living proof here that that can be done. You have a great one. God bless.